So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation with Marin Master Gardener Bob Mauceli. It's Gardening with California Natives. I'm Shireen Ash, a librarian at the Corte Madera Library, a branch of the Marin County Free Library, and I'm thrilled you all can be here and thrilled to have Bob back again. He's such an excellent, knowledgeable presenter. I know you will leave with all your questions answered. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that we are recording this presentation, and barring any unforeseen technical difficulties, it should be up on our YouTube channel. So that's the Marin County Free Library YouTube channel within 2 weeks. We will take questions and answers we'll take questions. Bob will create answers at the end of the program. So please put any questions you have in the chat. Put them in as we go along, and I will read them out for Bob at the end, and he will have a chance to answer them for you. I want to express my appreciation for the Marin Master Gardeners educational program and for partnering with the libraries to make these events possible. So with that, let me say a few words about Bob, and then he'll just dive into the content. So Bob has been a master gardener for just about 17 years, 8 in Marin and 9 in Monroe County, New York. He is a co-founder and co-chair of the Marin Master Gardener Native Plants Guild. He is co-chair of the Marin Master Gardeners Walks Project and original member of the Marin Master Gardener Fire Smart Project team. He's also a member of the California Native Plant Society, Marin Audubon Society, and he's a lifelong birder. Bob gives talks on gardening with native California plants, building home habitat corridor gardens, attracting birds to home gardens, and turning home landscapes into wildfire smart landscapes. All really important topics, especially the latter one. So with that, I will welcome you again to this talk. And Bob, it's all yours, and I'll see everyone else at the question and answer time.
Great. Thank you very much, Shireen. And good afternoon. I'm going to talk with you about using native plants in your landscape or your garden. Now, I've heard these kinds of comments, but they're difficult to grow, or they're kind of grab and colorless, or they're not really for a home garden. Mine's too small, or aren't they really a wildfire hazard, and so on. Well, I'm here today to tell you that much of that stuff is just not true. And I'll show you some pictures and talk to you to prove it. Now, this presentation is really Native Plants 101. So I'll share some solid information to get you started, and I hope hooked on native plants. Today, we'll be primarily looking at California native plants that are specifically found in and well suited for Marin County. And one of the handouts that Shireen has for you is a list of those plants. And then secondly, if you're interested in planting some of these natives in your own garden, then I'm going to be talking some considerations about selecting them and using them and how to plant them. And there's also a handout on these. And in relation to this, we'll discuss how to do some general care and maintenance of your native plants. But the thing that you have to understand is that the number of native plants in our region is astounding. So it would be best for you to seek out information on those that are best suited for your garden. And we've offered some links and resources for you to do that. One of the most important of those links is CalScape, CalScape, and that's www.calscape.org. That's a really great app to use. You go on, and you then, once you see the main page, you enter in your zip code, and you get back a list of plants that grow in your area. So that's a good way to start dealing with this. But first, a word from our sponsor. So master gardeners are trained volunteers who share their knowledge and skills with the public. And we're non-paid members of the University of California Cooperative Extension, and we answer inquiries and provide research-based information on home horticulture, pest management, and sustainable landscape practices. Now, here's some main issues that we're dealing with in this presentation and in general in dealing with gardens in today's environment. We're essentially recommending ways of maintaining home landscapes that build and support a healthy, natural, ecological environment in Marin County. And that's in the face of potential environmental challenges like the main ones of climate change and the need to reduce home wildfire hazard risk. We think that native California plants can play an important role in helping us deal with both of those issues. So I guess the first thing I have to do is say, why should you believe anything I say? Besides the fact that I've been a master gardener for a long time. Well, it's really desperation. That's what our place looked like when we moved in about 10 years ago. We had 10 really pretty valley oaks, and we had, you can see them in the background, about 21 Tuscan olive trees, and that's it. There was a little bit of a lawn that was in bad shape and these barren hills. So what I had to do was figure out a way that we could make these barren hills into a natural garden. And I decided that using native plants would be the way to do that, because after all, those were the plants that lived here long before this house was built. So the role of native plants, it's important that we understand that and how to deal with them in our gardens. And our home landscapes and gardens are important elements of a healthy environment and ecology in Marin County. We don't often think about that, but it's true. And that means they're worth preserving because they will help us rebuild biodiversity in our environment by protecting and extending Marin's unique plant communities. And we'll talk more about plant communities a little later in this presentation. They also encourage beneficial wildlife by creating habitat for insects, birds, mammals, and other living creatures. It turns out, including us people. And they help preserve and protect natural environments by avoiding materials and practices that may harm them, by building and protecting the life in their soil, by reducing the use of water, energy, and other critical resources. And finally, they can even help mitigate climate change by encouraging natural services like producing oxygen, sequestering carbon, eliminating waste, producing pure water, and more. Creating or improving all of these in home landscapes is the role of native plants in a healthy garden and a healthy, fire-smart environment. The design of the landscape and its defensible space using fire-smart gardenlands reduces fire hazard risk. The use of native plants enhances that natural environment, makes it healthier, more sustainable, and a more fire resilient and climate change resilient environment. So California has the most diverse natural ecology in the United States, and maybe even in North America. And it's certainly one of the most diverse in the world. And that includes its plants. I said an astounding number of plants. Well, so far, there's been about 8,000 native species in California identified. 3,000 of those or so are in the Bay Area, and in Marin, it's 1,600. So there's plenty to choose from. But the thing that people keep asking is, so what is a native? is it something that's endemic? It only grows in this state or this county, or only in your backyard or in your area? Or is it something that only grows in the West Coast or west of the Rockies? Or is it a subspecies of a species or a cultivar of these wildlings, or what? Well, we think that regardless, if it be an endemic or a Wild West plant or a subspecies or a wildling, that what we want is something that's suitable for landscape use. And it's estimated that of the 8,000 landscapes in California, perhaps less than 2,000 of those are anywhere near suitable for garden use. And so what we're thinking about are plants that are compatible with our environment. And by our environment, I mean the one in your backyard and my backyard, that are survivable in there, that are sustainable in that environment, and frankly, that are available for us to acquire. That's been in the past, it's getting better, but in the past, that's been a serious problem. And we'll talk a little bit about that later too. So why use natives? That's the first question that we need to answer. And my answer to that is to help restore what has been lost. And what we have in this picture is a California towhee male. He's coming out of my planting of California fuchsia. And he's got in his bill the caterpillar of a white-lined sphinx moth. Now, he looks a little tired, doesn't he? Well, he might well be a little tired, because he and his mate have typically about 5 little nestlings that they have to find up to about 350 items of that kind of caterpillar per day for anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks to bring them to fledgling stage where they can fly away on their own. So tired, yes, but the real problem is that because natural diversity is disappearing, those caterpillars may be disappearing. Habitat loss and fragmentation is growing in our wild environments, and home landscapes aren't healthy, because most home landscapes, as Doug Tallamy has pointed out, are about 80% exotic or non-native plants, and of that, about 92% in a lot of cases is lawn. And that's not an environment for any wild creature. That means that we've seen serious species loss in native plants, in insects like the white-lined sphinx moth and its cohorts, and birds. In the last 30 years, for example, here in North America, we have found that almost 50% of the populations of bird species have lost significant amounts of population. In fact, a number of them are bearing on extinction. And that's also true of small mammals. So what we need to do is we need to think about how we can turn that around. And it all begins with the plants. A healthy residential landscape is the result of providing the best horticultural and gardening practices for our yards that we can find. And most important, healthy plants are likely to be more fire resistant and resistant to climate change than plants that are struggling to survive. And the elements that you have to consider in all of this To foster this plant and landscape health are the basic elements of the sites themselves. And by that, we mean the plant communities and microclimates that they're in, the sun exposure that they get, the topography that they're on, and the soil that they're planted in, the plant spacing and placements, good cultural practices, including mulching and pruning and cleanup, and most important in our dry environment, an efficient, well-maintained irrigation system for appropriate irrigation and hydration. So using native plants are an important element in sustainable gardens. Simply, they make them better. They are more in tune with local environments. They support biodiversity. They're used more heavily by wildlife, and they're actually required by native butterflies. Native butterflies don't lay their eggs on non-native plants because their caterpillars don't recognize them as food. And finally, they lighten the ecological load on the environment. They use less water, chemicals, and are more in tune with our environments. All of that produces a healthier home and community landscape that can also be more resilient and adaptable to change or danger. And why is that? Simply because California native plants have co-evolved with everything around them. They've co-evolved with the Marin Mediterranean climate, its geography, its topography, its soil, and the animals, birds, and insects that live here. It's really California's true landscape. And that's really important in terms of, because it's California's true landscape, it actually they work better in our environment. Local native plants have been deeply associated parts of long-established local natural ecosystems for tens of thousands of years. And this means that they are healthier, more resilient, because they are better associated with that ecosystem's microclimate, soils, and mycorrhizal subterranean networks. Natives may just fit in better and perform better than non-natives. And this close association makes for a number of different things that are really important in the environment we live in. One of which is the fact that native plants normally stay hydrated longer on just average amounts of rain and irrigation water. And that makes them more resilient to wildfire. Just one item. Studies show that native wildfire visit and use native plants. I mentioned that before, more frequently than non-natives. The other thing is they also stay longer when they do visit. And with some of the pollinator, butterfly, and bird species in Marin, this can be as much as 3 to 5 times more frequently and longer. And that's why planting native plants may help decrease the serious decline in the populations of these wildlife. Now, my little Rufous hummingbird visitor here knows this. He headed right for the hummingbird sage the morning that he arrived on his migration from Southern California and Northern Baja to Alaska. So here's a checklist of things that you might look for in plants that you want to plant in your landscape. And they have to do with how plants are used as opposed to what the plants are, how the landscape and its plants are done, not how they're chosen. So let's look at this. One of the things is planting the right plant in the right place. How long will the plant live? How wide and tall does it get upon maturity? How much sun exposure versus shade does it need? What's its tolerance to your soil and water use? Is it healthy? Do the plants look healthy and thriving, or are they drooping, shriveled, diseased? And healthy plants, as I've said, are more resilient and more adaptable to change. Is it water-wise? That's a real important here. We only have a limited amount of it, and we want to use as little possible as we can. Is it also pollinator friendly? That's also important, because what we want to do is build healthy, genetically diverse ecosystems and food chains here, so that the biodiversity all around us is returned to what it used to be in the past. And finally, are these plants well behaved? First of all, are they not invasive? That's really important. But also, do they produce a lot of dry branches or debris, or do they produce only a little dry branches or debris around? These are all things that are important in choosing plants for your landscape or your garden. And as native plants check most of the boxes that I've just talked about, they might be among some of the best choices you can make for your garden. Why native plants? Well, yes, it's native. Native plants are California's true landscape, but they produce some significant benefits. They reduce water use, soil disturbance, plant maintenance, and chemical use. They sucker beneficial insects, native animals, and birds. They produce beautiful natural gardens and healthier surroundings, and they save money and save work. CNPS has done, that's California Native Plant Society, has done research on that. And here's an example of what they found. That in terms of sustainability, native plants use as much as 83% less water, produce as much as 56% less green waste, and 68% less maintenance than non-native plants. And the ecological qualities are with us. They're locally synced with our environments. Therefore, they grow well here. They produce fewer harmful pathogens, and they provide essential services that we need to continue to live here. So I said we'd talk about Marin native plant communities. And let's define what we mean by plant community. Glenn Keeter and Ellery Middlebrook have done this in a book, Designing California Native Gardens, that they produced. Now, they said plant communities are repeatable assemblages of plants that grow together because of similar adaptations to climate and microclimates, soils and slopes, and biotic factors. And the reason why it's important to understand that is that understanding where the natives grow increases the chance of success in your garden. So the primary marin plant communities are redwood and mixed forests and coastal scrub in the fog belts. And then in the sunny, more open and drier areas, oak and foothill woodland, grassland, and chaparral. And again, that's important because these are the things that determine our ability to grow these plants successfully. We want to mimic what's around us. We want to rebuild mini plant communities in our gardens so that they can produce good, healthy gardens. Let's start with redwoods and evergreen fog belt. And by the way, does anybody know the difference between a forest and a woodland? Well, as you'll see from this picture, forests have closed canopies, and woodlands have open canopies, as you'll see in the picture that I've got of an oak woodland. So some of the key dominant plants in the redwood or mixed evergreen forests are redwoods or mixed evergreens. And we'll talk about, in this area, coast redwoods, Douglas fir, coast live oaks. And the same is true of not just trees, but of shrubs, western azalea, California rosebay, evergreen huckleberry, and then perennials and ferns and annuals, a western white trillium, western red columbine, western rue, mountain meadow rue, western sword fern, spiny sword fern, and redwood sorrel. Those folks of you that live in plant communities that are redwood or mixed evergreen forest plants in South Marin and Western Marin and other areas recognize these plants, walking through them, looking at these plants, particularly some of the trillium and redwood sorrel and those things, as part of the beauty of living down there. In terms of northern coastal shrub, that's considered kind of like a soft chaparral, and it usually occurs on hillsides or cliff sides near to or overlooking the ocean or parts of the bay. And the dominant plants there are the northern coastal scrub plants, soft chaparral, California sagebrush, coyote brush, ceanothus species, and some cultivars, black sage and other sages that grow in here, cow parsnip, and things like ajuga or other perennials that grow here. In fact, northern coastal scrubs are the source of many of the plants, native plants, that we can plant in our gardens. The other one is chaparral itself, and we'll talk a bit about that in just a moment. So oak and foothill woodlands, well, the dominant plants there are oaks, and valley oak, blue oak, coast live oak, and California black oak are some of the ones that grow here in Marin, along with their neighbor California bay tree, which is a beautiful tree, but unfortunately also happens to be a host for a sudden oak death. We also have in this area buckeyes, the buckeye tree, and pines, but the main ones are the oaks. And we also have shrubs that are used from here. Coffeeberry, California rose, common manzanita, and madrone. Grasses include Idaho fescue, purple needlegrass, and California brome. And wildflowers include monkey flower, blue dicks, suncups, and clarkias, and California buckwheat, like you see in this. And grasslands, well, dominant plants there are grasses. Getting this together. June grass, Idaho bluegrass, red fescue, and other fescues, and the California poppies that go in this warmer, open kind of areas, along with clarkias like Farewell to Spring and blue-eyed grass. So chaparral is a semi-arid, shrub-dominated area. It's usually higher and hotter than things like the woodlands or the grasslands. And the dominant plants there are coffeeberry, bigberry manzanita, and other large manzanitas, larger, shrubbier ceanothus plants, chamise, mountain mahogany, and scrub oaks. These are plants that are the progenitors of the plants that we use and can buy from California native plant nurseries. And so along with the things from coastal scrub provide a basis for the native plants that we can choose for our gardens. So now that we've seen some examples of the native plant communities that surround us, depending on where we live, let's think about how we can use these plants to turn them into a mini native plant community. And we'll talk about how and when we should plant these things. The first thing you want to do is plan what you're doing. And this would involve site assessment of what's my climate. Besides having a Mediterranean climate, Marin has a plethora of microclimates, and you should understand what your microclimate is versus your neighbors a quarter of a mile away, so that you can do that. It also has different kinds of exposure, soil, turf issues, and the contours of your yard versus your neighbor's yard. Mine happens to be on a steep slope. My neighbor's yard down at the bottom of the steep slope is a level area. In fact, he's got a large pool because I can't have one. So things like the layout, massing and maturity, hydrozones, fire ladders, turf issues, irrigation, and infrastructure are important things to think about whether you're designing a new garden or just an area in which you want to plant some native plants into your existing garden. The plant community, the climate and microclimate, the exposure, the soil pH, the quality of the soil, contours of your area, and the existing plantings are things that you need to plan around. And CalScape, as I said before, can help you understand the plants in your area that will help you do that. And again, that's www.calscape.org. So let's look at some of these fundamental plants that we consider for use in native plant gardens in Marin. And right at the top of the list is Arctostaphylos, begins with an A, and that's Manzanita. Manzanita is one of the signature plant communities or plant families of the California environment. And these are Manzanita plants that are useful in gardens and will do quite well. Howard McMinn Manzanita up in the upper left, Sunset Manzanita in the middle, and Sentinel Manzanita on the right. These three cultivars of Manzanita are, practically cast iron proof in most gardens in Marin. And then cultivars and the areas and the species in Sandmat Manzanita, Edmundsii Manzanita, and Hookerii Manzanita are also good to seek out for use in a native garden. Ceanotha is the other, foundation plant community, plant family for use in California. I'm kind of a Ceanothus nut, and my wife actually says that I've never met a Ceanothus I didn't like. And I'm planting right now more than 20 species or cultivars of Ceanothus, and all the ones on this chart are in my garden. And that's Concha Ceanothus, Blue Jean Ceanothus, which is a large one, Ray Hartman Ceanothus, which is a giant one. Mine is now about 10 to 12 feet tall. Anchor Bay ceanothus, which is a marvelous ground cover, as is Yankee Point ceanothus and Joyce Coulter ceanothus. These are good for most gardens in Marin and are beautiful when they're in bloom in spring and early summer. Some other foundation shrubs and small trees that you can consider: coffeeberry cultivars like Eve Case, pink-flowered currant, toyon, beautiful red berries called Christmas berry. My wife, we have a toyon. It looks like that when the berries are in there, but she's never been able to use it as the decorations for Christmas she'd like, because the robins and the other birds get to it before we do, and it's usually naked by about the end of the first week of December. Over here, we have a western redbud. It's in bloom in this picture. It can be grown just about anywhere in Marin County. Polyleaf cherry is a fairly large shrub. It's excellent in the drier areas, and it might even be worth a shot in some of the drier areas in southern and western Marin. And then finally, a Sikh tassel tree. You can see in this picture the beautiful tassels that are hanging down from this tree in the early, or through, I should say, from early to the end of spring. Perennials and subshrubs include California fuchsia. There's a number of these that are good in our plantings. Red flowered buckwheat and other California buckwheats. Yarrow. I've lost count of the sage cultivars that you can use. There's a number of them on the list in your handout. And then alum root, native, euchera, and monkey flower, native mimulus, and other species names or genus names that keep changing. And then lawn replacement. That's one thing that we actually push a lot. Why? Because something like 60 to 80% of the irrigation water that's used in Marin are used in lawns, and we'd like you to replace those with things that use a heck of a lot less water. So California native bent, California fuchsia, fescue, red fescue, Idaho fescue, native bunch grasses, low-growing perennials, sages like hummingbird sage, wiregrass, ground covers like caris, and low-growing crown cover shrubs like Yankee Point ceanothus, Catalina perfume, or creeping barberry are all things that you can use to significantly reduce your use of water on lawns. But the thing that you have to think about is that you need a lawn removal and a weeding strategy in order to do this. The first thing you have to do is remove and kill the lawn. If you started in fall, you may want to use mechanical removal or even herbicides to remove or kill the lawn. If you started in spring and summer, you can use sheet composting, which is the mechanism we would recommend to use, or solarization to kill the lawn. And then the plant replacements are, as I said here, but weeding is critical. So you need to learn to identify weeds. And the most important thing is you need to hand pull them, because if you let them go to seed or even flower, you'll be pulling weeds forever. If you hand pull them, the minute you see them, after 2 to 3 years, they'll probably get rid of them, except for a few exceptions. So planting. Well, I know this is counterintuitive, but choose smaller plants. By that we mean 4-inch pots and gallon plants. Most of my garden was planted in 4-inch pots and gallon plants. And the reason for that is they establish faster. They grow their roots starting the minute they're put in the ground, and they will establish faster so that, excuse me, so that they can begin to grow and become beautiful. Also, in planting natives, we'd like you to plant naturally, less formality, groups, clusters, clumps, layers. We're not planting, English gardens here. We're planting things that we're trying to mimic the plant community around us. And so it should look natural. And then finally, when you choose plants and when you plant them, you should do that with the maturity of the plant in mind, so that its placement, spacing, and access will do that, and so that the plant has enough room to grow to maturity, and it has enough space so that you can get access to it, to maintain it, and to reduce fire danger. Planting natives, what we say is natives plants in natives soil. So don't till or cultivate around or before you plant the native, because that frankly can damage the structure of the soil, and it can also release the carbon that your soil may have been sequestering for a number of years. And secondly, don't fertilize or amend the soil that you're going to put back into the hole with the plant. So planting, dig a hole that's 2 times the diameter of whatever size container you've got. Make sure that it's not planted so deep that the crown of the plant is below grade. Keep it 1 inch or 2 above grade. If you've got gopher problems, then maybe in certain plants you should use gopher wire baskets. And then you put that in the hole, and you put the native soil back in. You water it regularly, but infrequently and deeply. And then if you mulch or use compost, which is what you can use to actually provide nutrients to the plant, then you want to make sure you keep those away from the crown and trunk or stem of the plants that you're putting in there, because putting them there can cause fungi or rot to get into them. Irrigation is key to establishment. You want to establish hydrozones. So what's a hydrozone? It's a group of plants that have similar water requirements. You shouldn't plant roses with manzanita and ceanothus. Either the water the roses require will be too much for the manzanita and ceanothus and could possibly kill it, and vice versa. The drought that the manzanita and ceanothus want will probably kill the roses. So put roses over here and ceanothus and manzanita together over here. You'll probably have to irrigate your plants for 1 to 2 years for them to establish. And that should be deep and infrequent, like maybe once every week for 35 minutes. When you start, and have just planted the plant, put the emitter close to the ground at the start, because that's where the roots are. But as the plant grows, move the emitter out to the drip line of the plant, because that's where the new feeder roots will be, and those are the ones that take the water up into the plant. And as I said before, keep the ground clear and above grade. Don't fill in, don't cover it, because that can cause some serious problems for the plant. Issues with natives, well, an issue that is now slowly becoming solved is the availability. In this area now, there are a number of good native plant nurseries that specialize in these and that have not only a good selection, but also have a good staff that can help you choose plants. But be flexible here. If you can't get the species you want, look for cultivars of that species. If you can't get the cultivars or species, look for another set of native plants that have some of the similar characteristics. Be flexible and use them that way. Another problem is that some of our native plants go into hibernation in the summertime and don't bloom. Well, then find plants that do. Try companion plants from other Mediterranean climates around the world, like Australia, like South Africa, like Chile, and like the Mediterranean area in Europe itself. They often are in bloom when ours are not. And so the other thing is seek out native plants to California that do have a long series of bloom. Many of the sages have a long series of bloom, and other plants do. Lilac verbena, for example. I've had that in bloom in my garden for up to 9 months. So it goes through spring, through summer, through fall, and into early winter. Now, you also should expect plant loss. My landscape designer told me I should expect about 15 to 20% plant loss starting a brand new garden in a brand new area. And that's about what I've had. It should be less in an established garden, but don't be disappointed if you lose a few plants. I'm going to talk about landscape fire hazard risk. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it is important to cover. And so what I'm going to say is that the answer to the question, but are native plants a contributor to wildfire hazard? And the answer to that is no more than any other garden plants, because all plants will burn, no matter, as long as the conditions are right. And there's no research-based or peer-reviewed list of fire-prone or fire-safe range. So what's really important is the design, siting, and spacing and maintenance of our gardens to reduce fire hazard risk. That's what's key. And that's what I'm going to talk about very briefly in the next section. So here is organizing for fire smart landscaping. You've got the area directly around the house, 0 to 5, called the ember resistance zone. You've got zone 1, which is 5 to 30 feet out from the house, and the extended zone, which is 30 feet or more out from the house. And this is where the UC Marin Master Gardener community with volunteers and help desk volunteers in Novato can help with advice on answering your questions about how to do this. And defensible space is only part of the larger landscape management strategy you need to protect your home and property. The general surroundings leading up to your home must be considered as part of your wildfire preparedness planning. And so a note about these zones, the number of feet is really, except in 0 to 5, less important than what is immediate versus intermediate proximity to your home. So by following the guidelines I'm going to talk about reduces your risk, but again, nothing is important. The real difference is between zone 0 and zones 1 and 2. Not a lot of difference between zones 1 and 2. A lot of difference between 0 and them. So this is the mantra we're following and that I follow in my garden. First, plan and create defensible space around structures. And that includes the potentially flammable objects that are near them in that space, like trash bins, wood piles, and mulch. And yes, your plants and your neighbor's plants. Second, deal with plants as potential fuel in the landscape. So think about their placement, spacing, and separation to reduce fire spread, grouping plants and building fire breaks between those groups, limbing up plants and producing shrubs that reduce fire ladders, and making sure that there's good horizontal and vertical separation between plants. This is important, but the thing that's most important is then maintaining those in good health. And that includes pruning, maintenance, plant care, and irrigation to keep a healthy garden healthy and fire safe. So when we think about things like ember fall, we think about the ember resistant zone that's right up against the house. That area is responsible for most of the homes that are destroyed or damaged by wildfire, between 60 and 90%. And so here are the potential threats that you should look for to deal with that. First of all, no flammable mulch, fencing, furniture, or other flammable items in that area. No dead branches or other garden debris. No roof litter. No tall plants under the eaves, because if they catch on fire, their flames rise 2 to 3 times their height. So a 3-foot plant will rise up to 9 feet, and that'll take your eaves in a single-story home. Nothing flammable attached to or close to the house, and no branches within 10 feet of the roof or community. So that's the critical things that you should begin to look for. And what should happen is that you should remove the things that are prone to flammability and create them with things that are safe to use. So for ground cover or mulch, use stone, gravel, pavers, decomposed granite, other non-combustible materials. And in terms of plants, use only low-growing, non-woody, appropriately irrigated perennials or annuals. And I will show you some examples of these in the coming slides. Or succulents. And even here, consider California native plants. So here's what things might look like. So tall rosemary and lavender plants were planted here by the persons we bought the house from, right up against the siding in our backyard. And they were 3 to 4 feet tall. So we had them removed. and we replace them with the 2 to 3 feet wide beds of non-combustible pebbles that you see there, and then with low-growing plants to replace the plants that were there beyond that. And so what you see in the upper right is things like catmint, salvia hybrids, native coral bell hybrids, strawberry plants, and herbs. It looks great in spring, in fact, and early summer. It's just about done. That's what it looks like in the upper left when it's in bloom. It's just about done now. And so what we'll do now is we will cut it back to 2 to 4 inches, as you see in the bottom right, so that it is fire smart. And the things to remember here are important. So, you know, a lot of homeowners are particularly rezoned about leaving zone 0 barren. That's what they've heard. Remove the problematic plants and don't plant anything in there. Well, but as you've seen with the previous slide, with the appropriate plants, there are useful and lovely solutions to that problem. In addition to the Quechera and Salvia species that you see there, there are lots of other choices that include native plants that can replace problematic plants in that critical zone. How about California poppies or the 4 other California wildflower annuals that are shown in this? In the upper left, Farewell to Spring, a Clarkia. Next to it is cream cuffs. Below it, California bells. And to the right, to the left of that, we've got 5-spot. You can enjoy all of these. The California ringlet butterfly is certainly enjoying the Clyde 5-spot, and you can enjoy these and their relatives too. There are other low-growing species of these same genera or of other native annuals that would be equally good choices. And then we have native herbaceous perennials. Up in the upper left, we've got blue-eyed grass. Next to it on the right, beach strawberry. Below that, got penstemon margarita. And to the left of that, coast buckwheat. All of these grow below 12 to 18 inches tall, and can be cut back after they finish blooming so that they are fire safe. Or how about low-growing native California succulents? We don't often think about the fact that there are plenty of succulent species that grow in California and are natives. Catalina dudleya on the upper left. Next to it, coastal dudleya. Down below that, bitterroot lewisia, and to the left of that, cliff bays or Siskiyou lewisia. So these are all choices that you can make to be in this area. You don't have to be denuded to be fire safe. Now, with using any plants in what might be sensitive fire areas, you should check with your local fire district to determine, pardon me, if they've got any special requirements that you need to be aware of. Thank you. All right. So beyond that, we get a little looser. And the reason we get a little looser is that if there are flames beyond that have been ignited by embers or other fire danger, it's less likely to ignite your home. So these are the kinds of things that we might recognize here. So closer to the house, lower, appropriately irrigated plants. Moving away from the house, you can use larger shrubs and trees. You can also use wood mulch if you're 40 feet or more from the house. Vertical and horizontal space between the shrubs and trees is important, but especially on slopes. So pay attention to that. Also pay attention to trying to provide hardscape fuel breaks between plantings where that's possible. On some very steep slopes, it might not be possible. But if you can do that, please try. And then finally, all plants, wherever they are in your landscape, should be accessible for cleanup, maintenance, and irrigation. So some examples of that. This is an example of what you might do in a small garden, but it's in a larger garden. I'll talk this. Here's an example of good fire smart design. So up on the hill behind this, trees and shrubs that are spaced on that slope help prevent erosion, and the non-combustible retaining wall in front of them and the non-combustible paths and patios create fire breaks between the planting islands and the rest of the landscape and the home. And so most of the area are either native or Mediterranean climate plants. And that's true of the small space in front. I call that a habitat corridor garden. It's about 12 to 15 feet in diameter and about 18 feet deep. And it is, as I said, mostly native or Mediterranean area plants. And it is in bloom about 9 to 10 months out of the year because it's a pollinator garden. So it's a pollinator-friendly, earth-friendly garden, and in a relatively small space. So even if you have a small area, you can build something like this that will be beautiful and will also be earth-friendly and pollinator-friendly and drought-tolerant. Here are some plants that you can use. Closer to the home, up in the upper left, that's lilac verbena, Verbena lilacina. Next to it is the aptly named hummingbird sage. Next to that is red cauliflower bugweed. Down below is a bee's bliss sage, which is a good lower growing ground cover. And next to it is a small sage shrub, Ozo blue sage. More things that can be used closer to the home. On the upper left, that's emerald carpet manzanita. In the middle is Everett's Choice California fuchsia. And to the left are Baja pitcher sage, a really nice plant for late summer, early fall growing. Below that is Point Sal spreader, a larger, a broader sage a ground cover. And to the right of that is a nice vine for this area, Chaparral clematis. Now we moving a little bit more away from the house in the zone between 1 and 2. Here we removed a number of large, frankly, problem plants and replaced them with native annuals. You've got a royal lupin here, you've got California poppies, and even some Clarkia farewell to spring. And then because they're annuals, When they start blooming in about mid-February, they go to about the mid to end of May, and then we cut them down to get the seed for the following year. And we have actually underneath those, we're now planting some perennials so that we have some color and bloom during the summertime. It's truly smart and a good use of native plants. So again, in this area, we have smaller trees or larger shrubs. On the left is redbud tree, western redbud. In the middle is a large manzanita. It's Manzanita myra, or Monica, pardon me. And then to the right of that is my Ceanothus Ray Hartman, and other large Ceanothus would be okay, but this happens to be one of my pride and joys in the garden. It's gained about 4 to 5 feet since this picture was taken in 2020. And then some more now further away from the home. We've got on the upper right, upper left, Carmel Ceanothus, one of which is the Yankee Point Ceanothus, is a cultivar of it. It's in bloom here. It typically is in bloom for 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the area. Down to the right is Santa Rosa Island sage. It's a largest sage bush that is an amazing pollinator attractor. And then finally, on the lower left, we've got Catalina perfume, or the horticultural name is Ribes viburnifolium. And these are in the list of plants that I that will be handed out. And here again are plants, some shrubs. These can get really big, some of them. On the left, we've got spring showers, California currant. It blooms in the spring, as you can see here, and then it's got berries that the birds and small mammals really love. In the center is sugarbush, and on the right is a very large summer holly shrub. I think it's probably about 20 feet tall, but it provides really good habitat for nesting birds and for shade. And then below that, or to the right, to the left, is Pacific wax myrtle, which is a really good privacy hedge for a lot of areas to use. It also has berries in the fall that attract migrating birds. And then finally, we've got some things that get, more than modestly big. In the upper left, we've got Lewis Edmonds manzanita. These will get about 8 to 9 feet tall and about 6 to 8 feet in diameter. To the right of that is Toyon. You know that can get 12 or more feet tall and 6 to 10 feet in diameter if you grow it as a shrub, or even taller if you grow it as a tree. Below that is Fremontia. It's a California Fremontia and Taylor. It blooms, well, it's just about finished now. It blooms in late spring and early summer. And that particular plant is about 12 feet wide by about 5 to 6 feet tall. And then to the left of that, we've got 2 California Ceanothus blue jeans in bloom. They are among the first Ceanothus that bloom in my garden here. Okay, so the maintenance is healthy native plant gardens. And good basic care and cultural practices need to be deadheading, pruning, shaping, cutting back, weeding, cleanup, replacing plant loss, hydrating appropriately, and taking care of disease and pests using integrated pest management techniques. These are all the things that lead to healthy native plant gardens, or frankly, to healthy gardens, period. So when should you think to do all this stuff? Well, now. Planning and preparing your site, if you need to do it, should be done in the spring and summer. Planting should be done in fall and early winter, because that's when we're going to get rain, if we're going to get rain. So get them in the ground, pray for rain, and remember, with natives, it can be year-round, and you can enjoy them. Because if you build it, so let's take a walk through this native plant garden. They will come. As we go through this walk through a native garden, remember, what we're trying to achieve is horizontal and vertical space to increase fuel separation and reduce fuel mass. And we're also trying to achieve adaptation to climate change. So we've got reasonably good hard scale separation between the garden and my home, and fire breaks on the hill by using hardscape covered stairs, paths, and walls and a patio. What this shows is that wildfire hardening of the landscape can be done without leaving large barren spaces or denuding the garden. Often you can achieve the results that you want by pruning back plant bulk and height, or removing branches, or replacing plants that are problematic with beautiful natives. Let's take a look. Another look at the hill. In the background are the olive trees. We make oil. Water features and the way that we've provided for hardscape separation, which is non-combustible walks through the garden, and spacing throughout the garden. And you can see the spacing here. Here are some of the plants that we're growing. These plants require very little care once they're established. We do deadhead them when we need to. We do keep them pruned back so that they are less combustible. And they will come. Here we have monarchs, both the monarch butterfly and caterpillar. Here we have larger larger butterflies. Up in the upper left is a western Tygo swallowtail. To the right of it is mourning cloak. Down below is painted lady, and to the left of that is an anise swallowtail. Here we have more. We've got a total. I'm no entomologist, okay? So there's a lot of butterflies and moths we've had on our property that I can't identify. And even on some of the identifications that I made here, if you called me up and say, no, that wasn't a common buckeye that you showed us, it was a mumble, I'll believe you. But here we have what I think is a common buckeye on the upper left. In the center, I think we've got a California or gray hair streak. To the right of that, a field crescent. Below that, a Myletta crescent. And to the left of that, I think it's a woodland skipper. I know it's a skipper. Whether it's a woodland skipper, I think it is. Birds. We got almost 80 species on our yard list. And here's a rufous hummingbird. I said it's on his way to a nest, possibly in Alaska. And in fact, we've been in Alaska And we've seen these birds in Alaska, so I know that they nest up there. They may nest elsewhere, but I know they nest in Alaska. Okay, other birds, the western bluebirds on the left, a Bullock's oriole on the right. Below the Bullock's oriole, the state bird, California quail. We've had as many as 3 coveys of these guys with up to 45 little teeny babies. And whoops, to the right, a spotted towhee. And then we really do attract good pollinators. Beneficial insects abound. Native bees on the top, hoverflies down here, and dragonflies and more. So we think we've built what we'd like to convince you to build. And we've done it with native plants. Our garden is about 60 to 65% native plants and about 40 to 35% non-natives or Mediterranean area plants. So questions? And here's some help. You've got these in your handout, so don't hurry to write them back. But these will help you in getting an idea of what kind of plants you might be interested in. And when you do that and you need more help, you can reach us at the help desk or through our website. So thanks for coming, and questions.
Yeah, let me get started with that. We have a few, and thank you for putting the resources in there. I wanted to mention that I have put the Calscape website in the chat a couple of times. But let's get started with some questions. So the zip code 94925 includes both sunny flatlands and fog belt. So is there a way to drill down from just using the zip code for recommendations of natives?
Yeah, you will be able to do that, because once you get the total list for the zip code, there are then filters that you can filter down. And one of those filters has to do with aridity. So because we know that, down there are dry places. Up here in North Nevada, there are wet places. And so there are filters that you can use to key it even more to your specific site.
That's really helpful to know, because I'm sure that's true for many of our areas. I just wanted to mention back that we have 2 handouts that Bob created to accompany this lecture. And if you're interested in receiving them, please email me. I put my email incorrectly and then correctly in the chat. You should have it in your Zoom confirmation, but it's just sash, S-A-S-H, @marincounty.org. And if you email me, I will gladly send you the PDF of both of those handouts. So moving on to the next question, and that is, when do we prune our firecracker penstemon? The branches have gotten very long. Do we wait until after they have finished blooming?
Since I'm a flower nut, I if possible, I would try to do it after they're blooming, rather than while they're blooming, or even before them. But cutting them back is an excellent idea, and cutting them back after they bloom is probably when you would do most species of plants, be they native or non-native. That does 2 things. What you want to do, though, in any case, is you want to cut it back to an area where you won't end up with a stub. So look for a joint to cut it back to that's got what look like buds that could become more growth when it goes back into growth in the spring.
Thank you. Laura comments, I will just say that I have a garden on a slope, denuded of topsoil, so I find I do have to amend.
Um, you know, what you might try rather than amending totally, there may be spaces where you do, but rather than doing your whole tree, is you might try, excuse me, putting down compost, 2 to 3 inches of compost. And that will slowly work its way into your soil and help you create topsoil out of what is not topsoil. That's what I've done in my area. And this was hard clay here. And I mean, so hard that being a good master gardener, when I went out with my railroad pick to take soil samples to send off to the lab, I could only get down 6 inches. So try that in some areas, particularly the less steep areas, and reserve the tilling or preparation for areas where there's actually no hope. You'll thank yourself for doing that after a while.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. What is the title of the book by Glenn Keeter that you mentioned?
Geez, I should have that.
I could look it up while we move on to the next question.
Designing California native plants.
What was that? I'll type it in the chat.
It's right on the screen right now.
Oh,
I've
okay.
got it on the screen. It's the second one down, and it's Designing California Native Gardens, a plant community approach to artful ecological gardens. I believe it's still in print, but I know that it is in a number of libraries in Marin.
Okay. Thank you for that. I will look for it when we have a moment. Our next question is, we have a hydrangea that hasn't had any bloom for several years. Is that because it is not suited for our property? It's not likely a native.
When did you prune it?
Patty, when did you prune it?
It gets pruned every year, thinking that it will probably have flowers on the new growth and fertilized.
Okay. Hydrangea actually blooms on 1-year wood. And so by pruning it like in midwinter, what you're doing is you're pruning the flower buds off of the plant. They may be teeny so that you can't even see them, but they're there. Now, when I was a master gardener in Rochester, the question you asked was the number one question we got asked. And in 90% of the cases, it was that they were pruned at the wrong time of the year. And so that's why I asked, when did you prune it?
So is it better to skip pruning entirely?
Well, you prune it immediately after it blooms.
But it doesn't bloom.
Well, but what I'm trying to tell you is, if you're blooming, when specifically do you prune it? What time of the year?
In the winter.
That is removing the blooms. And so if you let it go through the winter, you may get some bloom. In fact, I'll bet you will get some bloom. And then right after the blooms start to fade, you prune it down that time.
Okay, great.
And then over the year, it will develop new blooms, new bloom buds that will bloom the next year.
Perfect. Thank you.
I wanted to say that the book Designing California Native Gardens is based in many locations. You can put a hold on it through your MarinNet app or by calling your local library or coming in or looking up your library on online. And I'm just adding the call number into the chat so you can find it. And with that, I just want to say we are at time. So I want to thank you, Bob, for another astounding presentation. So much great information. I'm very grateful, as I am sure everyone else is. Also, I have to say your images are beautiful. I really appreciated the slides, the quality of the slides and the color and all the beautiful wildlife that you shared. Before we say goodbye today, I want to let you all know that Bob's doing another presentation exclusively on backyard birds. It's called Backyard Birds and Bird Habitat. It'll be next month, Wednesday, July 12th from 4 to 5:30. You can register for it through the Zoom link if you go to the Marin County Free Library website, marinlibrary.org/events, EVENTS, and that'll bring you to the calendar. You could choose July 12th, or you could browse through all the events and see if there's anything else you're interested in. And with that, I just want to thank you again, Bob, and thank everyone else who attended. Thanks for your great questions and your interest in this topic. And we will see you next time, I hope.
Great. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, always. All right. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your day and happy gardening.